What is going on, GBA fans? My name is Burke, and today we bring you the second of the conference finals battles, this time between George or Septile MC and the San Francisco Arcaniners against Monotui, coach of the Tampa Bay Lux Rays. And of course, I am not alone. I am joined by the Confusion.
What is going on, guys? I am the Confusion, and just like Burke said, we are here for the other playoff conference finals battle, which is going to be really exciting. Like he said, George versus Mono, really good competitive battlers. So I'm excited to see how this turns out.
Yeah, and before we get into this, if you happen to watch this on George or Mono's channel, you'll know that there was actually a DC turn 4. So I'll spoil it now. The first few turns are going to look a little bit weird. In this case, George is going to lead off with Suicune, and Mono is going to lead off with Rhydon and click Scald as Mono clicks Roar. That is just to recreate the situation that happened before, because George, the first time before they DC, did get a first turn free to the Mew on the Rhydon and got an appropriate amount of damage off on it. So that's just going to be a little bit different. Aside from that, I have not watched the battle, so I do not know what happens in it, just aside from those first few turns, because that's kind of important to get out of the way. But anyway, looking at the teams, it's a very interesting matchup. Mono didn't bring the Jirachi, which I was actually kind of surprised about. Jirachi is one of those mons I see in League format that just kind of you can slap on any team and it always does something good. But he doesn't. Instead, he opts to bring the Rhydon, the Buzzwole, Greninja, Roserade, Salazzle, and the Florges. And I can see why he's bringing all of this. Rhydon is a pretty decent stop to something like a Scarf Garchomp, even though obviously Scarchomp can go for like an Earthquake. Rhydon is incredibly bulky and carries out Ice Punch. Salazzle just looking like a big threat. It is fast, it hits things very hard, and can Toxic everything. And then you've got Roserade, which again, George is going to have to find a pretty good switch in for that, because Roserade, if it's very offensive, you know, can punch a lot of holes. But then on George's side, I know he's got the Assault Vest, 4 attacks. Mew can obviously put in quite a bit of dents. Scarf Mienshao looks like it can be obviously a pretty big threat, given that the Florges is gone. And Suicune is obvious, very hard to deal with, especially if the Roserade goes down. Suicune's just going to be a gigantic threat. So what are your thoughts on the teams?
Yeah, similar thoughts. I see Buzzwole as a very prominent threat. Of course, George did upload a team builder, so I was able to watch that, but Mono did not. So I'm unsure exactly of what his sets are going to be. But looking at it initially, obviously Buzzwole can hit almost everything for super effective damage, barring the Mienshao and the Suicune, and they're not going to appreciate superpowers. So I'm interested to see how he's going to use that in his advantage. A mon like Roserade also has great coverage. It can switch into Suicune no problem. It can handle Togekiss to a certain extent. Same with the Registeel if it's carrying a Technician HP Fire or anything of that sort. So let's get into the battle.
We're going to get into the battle, and as you can see, we've got Mono leading off with his Rhydon. And again, like I said before, this is a recreation. Initially, George had led off with Mew, but to get off the appropriate damage on the Rhydon, due to the freeze and the ice beams, Suicune's just going to go for the Scald to get off the right amount of damage. But first turn freeze on Rhydon is huge, though, in the original battle, because that means Mono can't get up rocks. I know this Rhydon's probably his only rock setter for the team, and not being able to get rocks up is huge. So I think at this point they do actually get into the battle. So we've got the Assault Vest Mew out, and Mew goes for Ice Beam. Not going to do too much damage to the Florges. Florges is going to be the special sponge needed for the Mew.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how this is going to play out. Obviously, Mew is going to have a lot of trouble with this Florges, because it can kind of just stand in its way and handle a lot of things. But as he brings out the Registeel, that is going to be really, really good, as that thing handles it really well. This is an interesting curse kind of Registeel, but it is carrying Earthquake, so I'm interested to see how that's gonna play out.
Yeah, Mono made a good double into the Salazzle, but I guess George, knowing he can take the Fire Blast, goes for the Earthquake, meaning that Salazzle, which looked to be a giant threat, is now out of the way, and Registeel picking up the first kill of the match, doing a really good job taking out that Salazzle.
Yeah, that was really quick. Obviously, he risked a lot of damage on that Registeel, so he's going to have a lot more trouble with certain Mons. But that's, clearly we see a free switch into the Buzzwole. So now, George is going to have to pick a switch.
And obviously, the Togekiss can take superpowers very easily, 4 times resisted. Mono couldn't really risk going for, like, a Poison Jab, expecting the Togekiss to come in, because he probably doesn't want the Buzzwole to get poisoned. You know, if it's like a sub-variant or something. But the superpower comes out, does next to no damage, and now Togekiss is in. And unless Mono wants to lose the Buzzwole, he's going to have to switch out. And so we see it go for the Air Slash, and that looks to be a 2-shot on the Rhydon.
Yeah, it's risky, because if it's not, then that's going to be a risk if that Rhydon goes for anything like a Stone Edge or a Rock Blast, but he's going to take that risk. I think it is to a KO, and if anything, it'll probably flinch, but it is going to take down the Rhydon. So 2 Mons already down on Mono's side. Yeah,
George is looking really solid right now. Registeel is fairly damaged, but I don't really see it being needed for much, aside from maybe the Roserade. But here comes the Roserade. Obviously going to threaten out the Togekiss.
Yeah, immediately. But like I said, that Registeel is still going to have a fairly decent amount of health after that Fire Blast. But we do see Spice on the Roserade, so entry hazards is going to be an issue. He does have the Togekiss who wants to defog, but I don't think he's carrying defog on any of his Mons, including the Mew. So those spikes are probably going to be up to stay.
Yeah, and the fact that rocks aren't up is really big, because one layer of spikes, it sucks, but I think it's very easily played around. And George getting up his own rocks, which is going to severely limit quite a few of the switch-ins, because I don't think at this point Mono has anything that resists rocks.
Right. He didn't bring the Jirachi or anything like that, so everything's going to take a good chunk. The prediction does not work out. He did predict that Jirachi to come in and kill it with an Ice Punch, or at least do a lot of damage, but the Registeel does stay in, and we see how little that Aerial Ace does. Almost minimal damage.
Yeah, Buzzwole is just a defensive monster. Registeel not nearly that powerful, and that's just kind of funny how little that did.
So we are going to see the Garchomp come in. This is a toxic SD Chomp, so I'm interested. Yeah, that Ice Punch was there, so Mono makes the great prediction, expecting that Registeel to switch out, but we do see that Garchomp is going to live, but a huge turn of momentum for Mono this turn.
Yeah, but Buzzwole is getting severely weakened. We see it says Scarf Buzzwole, so it's locked in the Ice Punch. He traded the Garchomp for information and a lot of damage off on the Buzzwole. Can't survive under the Rock Switch-in, so again, a pretty favorable trade for George.
Yeah, he is going to have to stay in, of course, and that does give Suicune the safe switch, but I don't think he wants to risk this Suicune setting up, so I think he is probably just going to save the Buzzwole for depth fodder.
That would probably be the best, if he just lets it... No, he actually is just going to let it take an Ice Punch, and it doesn't matter if he frees the Suicune, it probably has Scald anyway, but George just opts to go for the Ice Beam, I guess predicting Mono to switch out, expecting him to try to start setting up on it.
Yeah.
So
that was scary, though, because I know this is a Subcombined Suicune, so that could have been very dangerous for Mono, but it works out for him.
But Roserade is always a good switch in into Suicune, because Ice Beam still won't do that much. Roserade has a lot of special defense to it.
So we are going to see the Suicune pull back and the Mew come in. It is Assault Vest, so it could probably take any hit, but if another Spike comes out, that'll be dangerous. It's just going to be a Giga Drain. That Mew is going to take that relatively easy, and it is going to threaten out the Roserade, most probably with a Psychic Attack. We'll see if he's going to stay in or not.
Yeah, I don't think George at this point has to make any really big predictions. He might go for the Volt Switch, you know, expecting the Roserade to switch out, but he just opts to go for the Psychic. I don't think Greninja can actually take out Mew from this range, but
especially not with that Assault Vest.
And especially if the Hydro Pump misses.
Yeah.
And
that's a lot of damage on that Greninja.
Yeah, that is a severely weakened Greninja. I mean, he doesn't need a lot of health on Greninja, unless it's Life Orb.
Right, we didn't see that because of the Hydro Pump miss, but it's not going to end up mattering. If he did want to save it, that's only a couple more Stealth Rocks, which is anyway, so I think it was fair to just sack that thing off. But he is losing a lot of Mons this game. Well, I'm interested to see how he's going to try to pull it back with probably Mons like, I mean, the Rose Raid, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't think at this point that Mono really has a chance, because Rose Raid, it doesn't outspeed enough on George's team. I don't think it has enough coverage because we've already seen the spikes. So it's got dual stab, spikes, maybe a hidden power, but I don't think that's enough. And Togekiss just tanks that Sludge Bomb and gets off a ton of damage on the Rose Raid.
Yeah, that was a lot of damage. I don't think, obviously, the Togekiss is going to be able to take another Sludge Bomb, but that was a lot of damage on that Rose Raid, and it's going to prohibit the amount of time to switch into Stealth Rocks, even though I believe it is a black Sludge set, so that should help him in that sense.
But if this Rose Raid doesn't have Hidden Power Fire, it is not touching this Registeel whatsoever.
Yeah, not at all, especially because it has Aerial Ace, so it can touch the Rose Raid back. This is also another opportunity for the Registeel to set up a curse, so I'm interested to see if he's going to take that chance with only 2 months left for Mono.
And as we see the Synthesis, that means this Registeel can easily stay in the field and start setting up curses. Rose Raid has no way to touch it. So we see the curse. I think this just might be game at this point. I don't see how Mono can do anything. He has to switch out. Rose Raid, best move to hit Registeel is Giga Drain, and that's going to do almost nothing to a fairly specially defensive Registeel.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Registeel is going to be able to clean up, depending on if he has any hidden tech, I guess. But yeah, the Giga Drain's not going to be enough. And George is going to be able to just set up curses and start clicking Aerial Ace or Earthquake.
Yeah, so this is looking just about to be game. Overall, I think this is game. I'll commentate like it is the end of the game, because Mono just has Roserade and the Florges left, right?
Right.
And I don't think either of them can hurt Registeel at all. So I think this game was definitely very favorable for George, turn 1 with the turn 1 freeze and the Rhydon. Had Rocks been up, I think this would have been a little bit more of an even battle, because I think it would have forced George's switches a little bit more, gotten some chip damage off on things like the Mew switching in, the Togekiss especially. Togekiss was just able to freely switch in because Spikes didn't hurt it. So I don't know if that, it's hard to say if a turn 1 freeze guarantees that George won, and had the freeze not happened, Mono would have won. That's impossible to tell. That's just theory mining at that point. But it definitely helped to get that turn 1 freeze.
Yeah, and there were some noticeable misplays on Mono 2's part. Some that did matter, some that didn't. For example, the Ice Punch from the Buzzwole onto the Suicune. I don't think that was the best idea, especially since that Suicune could have probably set up in that thing's face and won that way, although the Rose Raid was in the back. I don't know if clicking Ice Punch would have been his best. I think it was still good as Death Water. So, although that didn't really matter too much, obviously, the Suicune just went for the Ice Beam that turn. It was a dangerous play. So we do see that the Registeel is able to get rid of the Rose Raid. The Florges does have Hidden Power, Fire, or Fighting, or whatever that thing has, but Earthquake's going to do a ton after all those curses. Yeah.
And with the Buzz, I think you need to try to make those predictions. When you're that far down and out of the game, you have to make some sort of really risky prediction to try to come back into it. But I think George just kind of had it on lock at that point. Once he locked himself to Ice Punch and the Suicune was able to come in, it was just kind of set, because Rocks were up, Buzzwole was one of his most offensive things to use, that couldn't come in anymore, and George has five mons left. So that is going to be the game. Very good game to George and Mono. George advances to the finals against MV. I'm really looking forward to that match. Very, very much so.
Yeah, that's going to be a very hype match. MV, someone who has made it as far as he has so far in his adventures in the GBA. He's made it to finals finally. He did not last year, so he's finally in the finals. We'll see if he could pull it in. But George, last season's champion, is he going to pull a back-to-back championship? that's going to be super exciting to see if he can pull that off, because I'm not sure that's ever been pulled off before. So if he does that, that'll be record breaking. But we are going to be obviously live analyzing that match next week, so that's going to be super exciting to see how that's going to end up turning out.
Yeah, and one other thing about that battle, they have not played yet. All of these battles have been rematched so far. The finals will not be a rematch, so that'll be very cool to see how both of them plan, and hopefully they plan at their best. So that's all we got for today, and we will see you all next week.
Peace.